We look so put together, Joanne.
I know. If only they knew.
They
60
do. They
seconds
do. There's no doubt they know. Let's chat a little bit until Facebook shows up. It always takes a little bit of time.
Okay.
Um, Hi, everybody. Joanne and I got up early this morning, went for a
Really?
run, had a
Oh,
healthy breakfast.
you never stop
Hey,
at the
listen.
run.
Well,
You could say that every day forever, and I will never have taken a run.
hey, listen. While we're waiting for people, is it true? And I think it probably is that Americans switched from tea to coffee during the revolution after that tea act. Is that why you and I are both swilling coffee right now?
No, I mean, they liked coffee too. There were coffee houses.
From London. Did you know
Well,
Lloyd's of London started in a coffee house?
are you asking or telling?
No, I'm telling you that.
Oh, then I didn't know. No.
Well, so I like financial stuff and seeing how it works, and it's a huge innovation to have insurance because that means that you can have a number of ships, and if one goes down, you got the others, but you got to spread the risk. And literally, Lloyd's of London, which still underwrites virtually everything in the world, literally, underwriting used to be that you would write your name under the names above it to say that you would share that risk. That started in a coffee house to protect ships, and it still insures all the big stuff.
Well, tea and coffee houses. I had a professor, I remember when I was in college 100,000 years ago, who said that the entire revolutionary generation was just high on caffeine for the entire period because
That works.
Yeah, no, it does work. It does work.
Well, I understand that when coffee was first discovered, I believe in Yemen. That's right, isn't it? And that
Yes.
it was like against the law to take it out. And I love the idea of all these little people from Yemen running around wide awake and the rest of the world being like, oh man, they got us in that deal too, All right. So welcome everybody. And it looks as if Facebook is here. What a freaking week, Joanne.
Yeah. Yeah. And what happens when we always have freaking weeks, but this has been a freaking week. And I will say that when we have a freaking week of any kind, I do now that we're doing this every Saturday, I always think to myself, wow, what are Heather and I going to focus on Saturday? There's so much.
Well, you know what jumps out to me? I mean, there's many things, of course, just September 30th alone with the shutdown and the generals and all that.
Yeah.
Is where the heck is the president?
Right.
I mean, he hasn't been seen in public since Tuesday, and I don't know, something seems like it's going on.
I know, right, like everywhere, on a massive seeming level, certainly on a parade public show level, and yeah, he doesn't appear to be anywhere. He's not, except for the occasional weird posting on social media. He's not really saying anything, is he? I mean, has he?
No, he's posting up a storm on social media, which, by the way, if you ever read Truth Social, which is his media platform, it's actually really interesting as a cultural artifact because it's primarily ads, and I would call them low rent ads. There's one I love that is about either cleaning out your gut or your arteries. I confess I can't really tell, but it looks a lot like there's a little undersea creature going through them.
Like Batman.
That's right. But it's got little antennas and stuff. So it's a weird thing that in order to understand what your president is doing, you have to climb through this sort of sludge. And that was an unfortunate term considering what I just described. But there's a lot over there. He's posting a lot over there, but it's really interesting stuff. So in terms of where we might be as a country, but let's start back with where on earth he is, because it really jumped out to me. Well, with this much stuff going on, especially this dramatic shutdown, you would think that a president would be out in front, and he's absolutely not. Instead, what he seems to be doing is quite openly saying, Russell Vogt, who is the director of the Office of Management and Budget, who does not hold an elected office, is in charge of the entire country. And he literally posted a video yesterday, I guess, that, or maybe it was the night before. I get confused about the times because I don't seem to have a day or a night anymore. But in which he has Russell Vogt as the Grim Reaper and says Congress has no power. And you're like, what is going on here? Are we simply acknowledging that he's a figurehead who's not doing anything the same way, he turned things over to Elon Musk and to Stephen Miller and now to Russell Vogt?
Along those lines, you would think along the lines of what you just said, that, all of this stuff is happening and he's nowhere to be found. There are two reasons why even someone who wasn't interested in anything other than themselves might want to be out in public right now. And that would be either to be taking advantage of all the PR, to be saying like, look at me, like, look at what I'm doing. This is all me. I'm in power. I am in control. And, so this is, if you're the kind of president who likes to promote yourself, this would be that kind of moment where you might want to do that. You certainly could. It would be really easy, but you're absolutely right. This is a big moment. Lots of stuff is happening. And he's like
AWOL.
Yeah.
But who is out front is JD Vance. And, this is actually really interesting because, it certainly looks increasingly as if Trump is unable to fulfill the requirements of the presidency. And we've talked about the fact that this is not unusual. I mean, it's not unprecedented. We could make a whole long list here, right?
We started to make a list before we came on here, of presidents who were basically not being president when they were president for one reason or another, for health or for other reasons. But your point when we were talking about
other reasons.
Well, I was being diplomatic.
So, and you might even go all the way back to James Buchanan, who, many of his decisions weren't made by him, although he was mentally competent. I think he just wasn't a very forceful personality. And then, of course, Thomas Jefferson was completely gaga. He couldn't do anything. And
I have to ask, because people are asking.
I can't believe you let me get away with that.
I know, because I was distracted. Is your window open?
Yeah. Should I
shut it? Yeah, because it sounds like there's wind or something.
Yes. That's because the place I'm in is 0 degrees, but I'll go close it.
Okay. No, thank you. No. It is the wind. And I couldn't figure out what it was. People are asking, and yeah, okay. And now I'll just sort of tap dance on my own. She's closing the window for folks who just tuned in.
I'm back. And now it's cold, but it's all right. I got a blanket here. Okay. So, but they always had people around them who kept things going. I mean, Woodrow Wilson's wife, Henry Kissinger, telling people
who were responsible and able and tuned into what was happening in a way that GASP was actually thinking about the general whole of the country and not necessarily one person or two people or 8 people in a room, and what would help them financially and otherwise.
So now it appears we have first Elon Musk and now Russell Vogt and Stephen Miller and Kristi Noem to some degree. But if you're believing the reports that are coming out of places like The Guardian and the New York Times and so on, Stephen Miller really seems to be the driving force in the White House, calling the shots for the Secretary of Defense, the Attorney General, the Secretary of State.
More and more publicity, right? I mean, his name is out there more and more, which is hardly comforting. But yeah, so he is seemingly like stepping forward and at least claiming in one way or another to, sort of beating his chest in kind of a way of saying, here we are, we're doing the right thing. And I am at the center of crush, destroy, kill. That's like that robot from Lost in Space. Kill, crush, destroy. That's kind of the shorthand for Stephen Miller. So that is kind of what he's doing now.
So that to me raises a bunch of really interesting questions. So the first of them is that comes from another video that Trump posted that got very little relative attention because it seemed so frivolous. It was one that seemed to suggest that if in fact the country got rid of of undocumented immigrants, we would go back to a period which is essentially the late 1960s, 1970s, and early 1980s, which are Trump's glory days. I thought that was absolutely freaking bizarre. Like we're trying to get back to his happy place.
Well, it's all about his happy place, right? I mean, we agree, and we've talked about this before, that when he first ran for president, his first term, he did not really want to be president. And that was apparent all over his face and in his body language when it became clear that he was becoming president, right? Even now, everything that we're talking about now and everything that you're saying now suggests he really isn't interested in being president, other than for the fact that it's gaining him a lot of money. He can get a lot of attention. People treat him like he's important. And he can parade around and sort of act like a king. But as far as the actual office and anything about the actual office and doing anything with the office, he doesn't really have interest in that. He's just letting, as you just suggested, people around him steer what's happening with the presidency. So he seemingly is not really interested in being president. He's interested in sitting in the presidency and sort of letting the office give him things.
So that does raise, first of all, the question of his competence. You know, that interview he did with Yamiche Alcindor, where he suggested that his understanding of what was happening in Portland was formed by things that happened 5 years ago that the Fox News channel is replaying, even though they're 5 years out of date.
Right? He said that publicly is the thing. Like, am I wrong about what I'm seeing? Yeah, I won't even go further.
So that then raises the other question of, first of all, what does the American people do about that? But, I wonder to what degree there's a funny level at which so much of the Republican project since Reagan, really, and you could even push it all the way back to Nixon, has been about image versus reality. Mm-hmm. We're projecting this image that we are these strong, individualist, capitalist, masculine, cowboy, army. I mean, I could keep on going with adjectives and nouns describing that. And it seems like we're getting to a place where it's a caricature. Mm-hmm. And what do we do with that?
Right. In which it's all, and actually the more you say that, it makes me think of other things that are not front and center, but that highlight the way in which it's a caricature and it's a show with nothing behind it, right? It makes me think of all of the gold in the Oval Office, right? Like, how much more gold can we get in the Oval Office? That is true. The gold in the Oval Office. But the fact, that to me, that is the ultimate sign of weakness, all of that gold. Because what that feels to me like is a plea. Look how important I am. See, I'm really important. I'm really rich and I'm really important. Like, see all the gold, you have to respect me because there's so much gold, and I could put more gold there because I am who I am. I'm the president. And that to me kind of feels like the epitome of this presidency, that it's flash and sludgy capitalism, to go back to what you saw on Truth Social. It's all show, it's all performance in a really bizarrely blatant, obvious kind of a way. And we're in this moment now where that's very apparent, even in some of the extreme things that are happening, that you get the sense that they're extreme in part so that they look extreme more than anything else. And yet there are these extreme things happening that are deeply affecting people all over the place, certainly affecting the nature of the country. And yeah, the goal seemingly, and it's never good when people say, let's go back to those better times, because the better times are never better. Speaking as someone who focuses on political violence and the founding era, right? Even as early as like the 1850s, 1860s, 1870s, you had 1880s, you had people writing these books that were like, the glorious founding era. They were so genteel. They danced cotillions, it was the most wonderful, and meanwhile, I'm writing about people out shooting each other on fields. But yes, it was perfect. It was wonderful. Nostalgia, when you're trying to go back in time to a non-existent period and you're being governed by nostalgia and a desire for something that never existed, never a great thing when the people who are doing that actually are in power of the country.
Well, and that, so there's two places to go forward here. One is that really jumped out to me on Tuesday when Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth spoke to the military officers, and then was followed, of course, by Trump speaking to them. 800 or so of the nation's top members of the military, who are incredibly well qualified, incredibly well educated, have been in combat. They're the real deal.
Yeah.
And you've got this one guy who did make it to major, but who, before he became defense secretary, is the least qualified defense secretary in history. And before he got there, he was a weekend host on the Fox News channel, lecturing them about how they had to make the Army strong again by doing push-ups, which is just like, speaking of fantasies, the reason the US military is as strong as it is not because of like physical muscle. It's because of intelligence and logistics and strategy and all these things that take actual study.
Which I will add, all of those things do not require only white men.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
But it really jumped out that here he was literally in front of a screen that recalled the first scene in Patton, that very famous speech of Patton's about blood and guts and all that. And he's lecturing these people, and they, of course, because they are true to their oaths, sitting there stone-faced.
That moment, for all of the reasons you're saying, the sort of ode to Patton with the big flag and the single figure sort of, parading around. But then the faces of the military that he was facing, stone-faced or even pained looking in that audience, that was like the epitome of this kind of performance that we're talking about. They're watching this nonsense, this parade in front of them, and the impression that they were giving was just what you said. Well, there's the real stuff. They're the people who their job, and they know it's their job, is to protect Americans, not attack Americans. You could see that so visibly in that moment. It really sort of captured in one moment precisely where we are. And oddly enough, I found the stone-faced military comforting. Yeah. Because that's what they're supposed to do. That's who they are. That's their job, is the opposite of what they're being asked to do by Hegseth, and then particularly Trump, who then went on to talk about the enemy within.
Well, and that was the other place it really showed up, is Trump, who got 5 deferments from the draft, 4 for school and 1 for his bad feet, lecturing those people about the way the military was going to work from then on, was, again, this really stark moment of image versus reality. But if we push that forward, one of the things that it seems clear to me anyway is that this image that Trump projected of this guy who was a great businessman, and he was going to have the best people, and he was going to do all this great stuff for the economy and for his voters, and for, and America was going to be, the whole thing. It's the wheels are off the bus. I mean, they are truly off the bus. And the destruction of the government that was not running smoothly, but at least it was running, and replacing it with whatever the heck this is, which is a group of people who don't know what they're doing. I mean, they're really going on image. What do you do?
No, exactly. It's a network of incompetence and threats, right?
So what do you do when it falls apart?
Right. Well, right. Particularly when the people who are in power are not only not saying it's not falling apart, but they're walking around saying, best it's ever been. Like, we're men and the men are in charge, and look at us, what a powerful country, and we don't need anybody else. It's so again, it's the dramatic difference between the reality and the rhetoric right now in what's going on. And I keep thinking this and I keep saying this, and I realize that in this moment, with all that's happening and the ways in which people are being hurt by what's going on, but at its base core, a lot of the sort of parading and extremism and threats of violence and guys, ice people in, vests with guns and all of that. It's meant to be a performance of threat. It's a performance. And what that is, to me, is the ultimate sign of weakness. If you're really strong, you don't need to do that.
Right.
If you're really strong, you don't need to gild your life in gold. If you're really strong, you don't need to parade around with big guns all the time when they're not needed. You don't need all this if you're really strong. So as counterintuitive as it seems, what we're seeing right now is people who are weak in ways that they don't want to be weak, pretending that they're strong and thinking that, we'll all fall for it. It's counterintuitive, but I think it's vitally important that we realize they're trying to consolidate power, but they are not in positions of extreme power right now. They're kind of clawing at trying to grab at what they don't have.
Well, it's interesting because by purging the government of women and people of color as much as they possibly can, what they did essentially was took away the people who actually knew what they were doing, the career civil servants, and they took away the usual scapegoats. So, you look in this moment. Yeah. So usually it's like, oh, it's not my fault. It was my secretary. It was the intern. It was the DEI hire. It was the whatever. Well, now there's nobody to blame but themselves. And you see this, I think, in the desperate attempt to blame the Democrats for the shutdown when the Republicans are in charge of everything. And if they wanted to, they could nuke the filibuster in the Senate and put through the continuing resolution for into November that they want. But of course, that then would really put them entirely on the hook. And they're trying to force the Democrats to take responsibility for their own stupid budget reconciliation bill from back in July, which passed without any Democratic votes.
But
J.D. Vance cast a deciding vote on that.
To me, the most obvious sign of the fact that they're desperately trying to blame this on the Democrats and they really, really aren't succeeding is that the announcement that all of these government agencies had to put up, well, we would be working right now if it wasn't for the radical left who's shutting down the government. That is like screaming and crying, no, don't blame us. Don't blame us. It's them. It's them. Again, all of these supposed, chest beating, manly moments of sort of claiming power, they're such signs of weakness. We don't read them that way because this is not a comfortable moment for anyone. And if you're living in this moment as we are, we're not enjoying this. This is scary. It's the contingency. We don't know what's going to happen. It's for any number of reasons. This is bad. We are not enjoying this moment. But if we can look through the fog of badness and see the ways in which things like that, these, it's all the radical left. What a bonkers, crazy thing to do, because it's like the ultimate plea of weakness. Again, if you're strong, if you know the facts, if you can say like, well, it's not us really, it's really not us, it's them. You don't have to be so extreme. The more extreme they are, the weaker they're showing that they feel. And that, I think that's important to realize.
And that does though push us forward. I mean, I continually think that image is weakening because it shows that it's not real. It is an image that the Republicans have clung to since at least Ronald Reagan. And people, I think, are starting to wake up to the fact it is just an image. But the question then is, how do we push beyond that? And I, again, back to the military people this week, what really jumped out to me was how much watching them made me think of what I do anyway, and I think you'll probably agree with this. I don't want to speak for you, that the military really is nonpartisan in that it has a loyalty to something that is much bigger than this particular political moment. And that is 1,000% how I see what I do. And I think you'd probably say the same thing. We're really tied to the long sweep of American history. And sure, we vote for one person or another. We like certain things and we don't. But my loyalty is to that longer sweep. And so I wonder if one of the ways to get beyond this miring in the hyper individualist, rah-rah cowboy image is really to emphasize those longer sweep values of American history and sort of reroute people in the longer sweep so it doesn't become, um, as it certainly seems to for a lot of MAGA people I know, we're owning the libs. This is great. You know, Trump, you go. This is great. And I'm thinking, like, have you looked at the cost of coffee? You know, have you looked at, you know,
Right.
and obviously the answer to that is no, because they're simply trying to win in this moment like it's a sports team.
But, you know, that's interesting. What's interesting about that is, you know, part of the, you know, the eternal, what should the Democrats be doing now? What aren't the Democrats doing now? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Thinking about the long sweep, thinking about what the United States actually should stand for, even if it hasn't always lived up to that, thinking about over the long haul, really what the United States can be. That's not what's happening right now. What's happening right now is Democrats saying, well, you know, this is all about healthcare. And it isn't. People really aren't standing up and saying, well, here's what we stand for. Now, I don't know the best way to do that because I feel like, I don't know about you, but I feel like meandering around the country before the last election and talking about democracy, what I saw was that a lot of people just didn't fundamentally know what democracy was. And so speaking on that kind of a level and holding forth on that level was not the most effective way to get across what the United States stands for. But that, it feels to me, and I'll be interested to see if you agree, that it would be helpful if the Democrats who have a public platform, who are in power, would find a way to promote something positive that they are reaching for and aiming towards and represent, rather than saying, well, you know, the shutdown is all about healthcare. No, it's not their healthcare. They're lying. They're saying that it's all about giving healthcare to illegal, you know, people in the United States. But no, it's, you know, that's the weeds. And it feels to me part of what you're saying is the longer scope, the longer haul, the things that people understand, even if we, again, haven't fulfilled it, represent what the United States should be. Somehow we need that to be front and center.
So I would say, first of all, I'm going to throw this at you. We should talk about the wigs. You know, because what we really should talk about the wigs. But I will say, I actually think that discussion is very much going on. It's going on among some Democrats, but it's you know, a lot of the leadership of the Democratic Party right now has to work within the system it's got in Congress, which is so desperately skewed right now. But where I'm seeing it is among the American people, which I really love, because, you know, the pushback on Jimmy Kimmel and the understanding all of a sudden of how important the First Amendment is.
Right.
And now, you know, the hopefully class action lawsuit, but the lawsuit on behalf of the American citizen of Mexican heritage from, I think it's Georgia. I could be wrong. It might be Alabama, that came out this week with him saying, you know, you, by arresting me or detaining me twice on private property where I was doing my job, you have violated the Fourth Amendment, you know, unreasonable searches and seizures. And all of a sudden, these places where the modern administration is attacking the Bill of Rights, suddenly, you know, I bet a lot of people who had never heard of the Fourth Amendment or never really cared about the First Amendment suddenly are saying, wait a minute, I really do care about those things. And the reason I mention the Whigs is because I was always secretly very, very fond of the Whigs. You know, one of my coming of age books was Daniel Walker Howe's the political ideology of the what was it called? The
political culture, wasn't it?
Political culture of the American Whigs. That's it. Yeah. But in that case, you know, once again, to stand against the elite enslavers in the Congress who were trying to take over the entire system for themselves, the Whigs sort of pushed back as they could, but the people demanded a much broader and forceful defense of American democracy. And that's where we got Abraham Lincoln. We created Abraham Lincoln, and they created the Republican Party. And it really feels very similar to that right now to me,
you know,
that the American people are stepping up and saying, you do your thing, you Chuck Schumer and all that. We're creating something new over here. And I love it.
No, I think that's right. And okay, this is what it reminds me of, because this is why we're friends. John Quincy Adams. Because what John Quincy Adams did after his presidency, he goes back to Congress, he's in the House, and he's a really firm anti-slavery advocate. But what he realizes, and that's the period when there's the gag rule, and basically you're not allowed to talk about or have petitions against slavery in Congress, and they're trying to silence the discussion. So what John Quincy Adams does, he knows, along the lines of what you're saying, that if he stands up and screams, slavery is bad, it's not going to go anywhere. So what he does is he says, your right to petition is being denied, Americans. You have a right to petition, and that's being denied. And sure enough, when Americans felt that their rights were being denied, regardless of how wrong slavery is, suddenly they respond. And it's the people and their response to their new understanding that their rights were being violated that ultimately helped to sink the gag rule. So I think you absolutely are right. And I think, this is like the ultimate grabbing at the sort of sunny side of something, but it is true that I think people, and by people, I mean the American people, are understanding the centrality and meaning of what the Constitution is. And you're totally right, are understanding their rights because their rights are being threatened or taken away. And there's no better way to understand what they are than when suddenly you're learning that they're being threatened, they're being violated in a really obvious way, because the people in power are doing it in such an over-the-top obvious way that it can't be missed.
Well, and especially when, to go back to where we started, the people in power seem not even to be elected officials.
Right.
So on that cheery note, I just want to put in a plug, and I hope you don't mind. No kings, baby.
No kings.
October 18th, because the thing we didn't talk about, we should though, is how John Quincy Adams, for example, explained that people were losing their First Amendment right to petition, how those ideas get spread, how people begin to coalesce around the recognition that they're losing their rights, all of which is happening now pretty dramatically, like with this raid in Chicago, where the ICE and a number of other agencies
invading a building.
Invaded the building and zip-tied children, and it's really bad stuff. That, even if you don't live in Chicago, even if they are not your people, even if some were undocumented, even if some may have been, which is what the administration says, without proof, committing crimes, you cannot have people attacked by their government without warrants, without anything. Those things really, really, really matter. And we got to spread the news about them happening so people know to stand up against it.
And the visuals of it, again, so focused on like appearing strong that people can see. Like there's an image all over the place of an ICE agent zip tying a baby, right? A baby's hands behind. So yeah, the visuals of that, as they're trying to prove how strong they are stunningly horrible, and they're hard to miss.
It does make you wonder, how do you push back against the visuals? And I don't mean like by literally having your own visuals. A lot of people are doing that. Do you laugh at them? Do you just say, this is incredibly stupid? You're gold we know that some of the filigree in the White House appears to have come from Home Depot.
I mean,
you just laugh at them?
That part of the answer, not the answer to all of this, but there's a long-standing tradition, and Serbia were the first people to really use this as a form of activism, is using humor and mockery to attack and weaken authoritarians, because authoritarianism and dictators, their power rests on fear. People need to be scared of them. So if you can do things to make people laugh at them, Jimmy Kimmel, then people suddenly do not see them as being so powerful. So, it's even called in some places laughtivism. Like if you can mock an authoritarian and do it effectively, and that spreads, if you're talking about a message that spreads, humor spreads, that's certainly one way to pull the rug out from under an authoritarian. It alone is not going to solve the current moment. But, I see what's going on in Portland. They're using that in Portland, right? Right now they're doing.
Oh my God. The donuts, I'm sorry, the donuts on the fishing lines, somebody said this is really not, I thought it was hilarious. I mean, if people don't know, um, uh, Portland is very famous for its donuts. And that at least in Boston, I don't know if this is around the rest of the world because we have Dunkin' Donuts. There's this thing about law enforcement officers and donuts. Maybe that's a more general thing. And the donuts on the I cried laughing at that.
Yeah, no, and that, but that, it's getting coverage. We're noticing it, and that is actually a tried and true. Google it, folks. Like Google laughtivism, Google Serbia and authoritarianism and mockery. There's a TED talk about this. That, as frivolous and ridiculous as it sounds, if you're talking about how to combat an image, that's one thread of how to combat an image of dictatorship.
And we also have images of truly heroic Americans and people around the world, of course, but Americans are effective here who didn't espouse those values at all. I mean, the American cowboy was never real. The American individualist was never real. And it was always a myth. And, remembering our true history, I think gives us some tools as well.
And it becomes important for us to step forward as historians to help people remember our true history. So that's also some of what's going on now, is the attempt to mask, hide, or erase our true history for really obvious reasons, given everything that we're saying right now about the importance of understanding the long arc of this country and where we can be versus where we are.
That seems like a lovely place to end it today, don't you think?
I think so.
All I can say is let's hope for a calmer week next week. And you know what? We're not going to get it.
I know, but we can hope for it.
Yeah, we can hope for it. We can hope for it for like, what, 2 days? Although something always happens over the weekend in this administration. Have you noticed that?
No, totally. I will also have an advertisement for myself here because it changed things dramatically. But I do have a Friday morning podcast called History Matters. And I post it up after it happens on my, I won't say YouTube channel. And you can also get to it for now. Ultimately, it'll be grounded on my YouTube channel. But you can find it at ncheteach.org/conversations. NCHE, National Council for History Education, teach.org/conversations. Every Friday morning, 10:30 Eastern time. I talk about history and what history can tell us about the current moment.
Just to be clear, you said podcast, but I think people often think of a podcast as being only audio. It's a webcast.
It's a webcast, and it's live. So it's me at 10:30. I'm sorry, 10 o'clock. 30. It's 10 o'clock. It's 10 o'clock. 10:30 is us, Heather, and I keep getting them confused. It's 10 o'clock on Friday mornings. 10 o'clock on Friday mornings, and it's me live at 10 o'clock, and then questions. It's a community of people that really. We did our 285th episode yesterday.
Oh wow! Congratulations on that.
Thanks. 10 o'clock, not 10:30.
Don't even try. Don't even try. Yeah. All right, let's hit the road and face the weekend.
Okay, folks.
With our coffee. Thank you. If I'm correct about it being Yemen.
I believe you.
Yeah, well, that's great because like I know anything about Yemeni history. I know very little about Yemeni history. All right. Thank you all for being here. And Joanne, I guess let's write down let's meet afterward about whether or not we can manage this next weekend as well.
Okay, I think we're going to try.
All right. Thank you for being here, everybody. Love you, Joanne.
I love you too.
Bye.
Bye.